told me about this whole new session that you are having, matters of the heart, it really just touched me personally, because it's just amazing to find a corporate that is willing to actually open up and have discussions that go way beyond the transactional elements of business, but start to bring people together to be able to speak about matters of the heart. Because at the end of the day, everything of who we are and even what we bring to the table in our, job functions, etc., it all emanates from what's happening in the heart. And there's been so much that's taking place in people's hearts, especially in these last few years that we've been through. And again, I was just so amazed how you've come up with this slogan, together we heal, together we grow, because that's exactly it, especially in these times that we are in. It's really about together. If we can't do this alone, it's impossible to walk this journey that we are all walking right now alone. It's just impossible. It's just impossible to do it. And so today I want to share some thoughts specifically about this topic, pushing through the dark clouds of disappointment and uncertainty. And before I start, I was just looking very quickly at the definition of the definition of the word disappointment. And it's interesting that the dictionary defines disappointment as sadness or displeasure caused by the non-fulfillment of one's hopes or expectations. Sadness or displeasure caused by the non-fulfillment of one's hopes or expectations. And as I thought about that particular definition, just the word sadness already in itself, one begins to realize how much of the last 2 years have carried so much sadness because of things that have happened within our lives, within people close to us, because of the pandemic. The displeasure that has been caused by the non-fulfillment of hopes that we had and expectations that we had, things that we were expecting to happen that suddenly came to a grinding halt, or suddenly things changed because of the circumstances that changed around us. And I was looking again at the definition of uncertainty, and there was a very basic definition of uncertainty that said it's the state of not knowing. And I thought, yeah, isn't that exactly again where we are right now? A state of not knowing. We are so used to knowing exactly what to expect. We are so, as human beings, we want to have control. We want to be in a position where I know what's going to happen next week. I know what's going to happen next month, and I can make all my plans. I can make everything work accordingly so that the outcome is exactly the outcome that I expect it to be. So I want to share a bit of a story with you in terms of how my life has played out in the last few years. I think some of you might have already heard a bit of my testimony, and that's available online. I think it's on some of the resources online already if you want to go and listen a little bit of my own story and a little bit of my testimony from the past. I'm not going to go into too much detail into that, but just for your own information, I'm married to Maud. We've been married since 1996, and so we actually celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary last month, and we are blessed with 2 boys. Our eldest is 20 years old, and his younger brother is 17, turning 18, actually doing his last year of matric. So he's actually writing his matric exams starting in the next few days. So that's my family. One of the passions that I've had for many years has been starting an investment business, a venture capital business that would primarily fund up and coming entrepreneurs, and that through helping them source that funding, we would also help them with the strategy and the building of their businesses, but from a perspective of building businesses that are healthy, but businesses that would also focus on dealing with some of the bigger issues that we face in the country, in the continent. How do we better take care of the poor? How do we better take care of orphans? How do we build business models that look to help people from the bottom up? And that's been a dream that I've had for the last 10 years, to get to the point where we have this funding business in place and we are helping these up and coming businesses to access funding and to establish themselves in this way. So from 2018 onwards, I had been hard at work putting this business together, putting all the different structures together, looking at all the different partners that we needed to bring on board. And the most critical element of this was we had secured a big investment fund out of the Middle East in Dubai, who had committed to investing R1 billion into South Africa. And they were going to do this through this venture that we had set up. So this was 2018, 2019 for me. We had more or less put contracts together. Everything to get us off the starting blocks was more or less in place. And for us as a family, having gone through several years of a number of very deep financial challenges, it was literally looking as if we were now at that place where things would now shift for us, where we would be able to now have a salary once again, would be able to now begin to essentially stabilize what we, our financial position, get us to a place where we can perhaps even start to consider re-looking to buy a home again, and generally as a family get to a point where we could be stable again as a result of this business starting to take off. So 2019 was a very exciting year, and the date we had in place for this whole transaction with Dubai to take place in terms of the funds, etc., had been set for the 30th of April 2020, and everything was all set to go. So in 2019 December, we are having our December holidays, and we start to hear the rumblings of this disease that's coming from China. We start to hear about this COVID disease. We hear about it in China, and we think, okay, that's a Chinese thing. And a few months later, January, February, it's now becoming a worldwide thing. By April, our investors in Dubai are now starting to say, hang on, we need to relook our position in terms of how we can allocate this funding, because we now have to start taking into consideration all our other businesses that might be impacted by this pandemic that seems to now be affecting and growing across the world. And therefore our risk factor has risen quite highly. And therefore we now need to relook whether we can actually go ahead with this investment that we were looking to do. To cut a long story short, that completely fell apart. And what that meant for us is that from suddenly being in a position where we expected a business to have taken off income, even from a family perspective, to be coming in, we were literally left with standing with nothing. And what that meant for me was absolutely no income for the family, no income for the business, and therefore a business now completely standing still, but a massive crisis at a financial level for me personally, to the point where even with our children, we were now at a risk with children not being able to go to school anymore. My firstborn son had a scholarship to go to Liverpool University, and we were all now left in a situation where we could not even afford to get him to the UK, the Liverpool University, because his scholarship was a rugby scholarship and rugby had also come to a standstill. They had to withdraw that. So he had to go through a massive level of disappointment of suddenly realizing that we couldn't afford to get him to the UK anymore, and we had to come up with a different plan. Our youngest, who is in matric right now, we had to get to the point of realizing that even with his school, we couldn't afford him to be at school. And we had to actually make a plan with that. And as a man and as a father, as a husband, for me, 2020 into 2021 was so difficult in terms of how do I handle it, where I have young children who are expecting certain things to happen, who had certain expectations in terms of what their life was going to look like. And as a father, I'm now in a position where I'm saying, boys, we can't do this anymore because the business side has collapsed. We actually don't have the money to do all these things that we had planned. And even as a husband, to see the disappointment in Maud, in realizing that the very dream that we had worked so long for and waited so long for had literally been snatched from our hands through a pandemic, and that there was absolutely nothing we could do about it. So that was a little bit of our story in 2019 into 2020, even into this year. It's been extremely difficult. It's been now having to revisit everything, but to revisit in everything while you are going through a crisis, while you are having to pick up the phone and call the headmaster at the school and say to him, please, can we negotiate for my son to continue with his matric, even though I don't have the money to pay for his school fees right now? Would you be in a position to grant us favor that he continues, and we will promise and make a commitment to pay as soon as we we are able. It involved having to now reapply for my eldest son to shift to go to Cape Town University, and for his dream for playing rugby in the US to literally, in the UK to come to an end, and for him to now receive acceptance at Cape Town University and to re-gear himself into that new pathway. It meant more than myself as parents realizing that our dream of getting back into owning a home had to be put on the back burner, and we literally were back into survival mode, surviving just to trying to make sure we just have enough to keep the boys going. And once the boys were okay, that we just had enough to get by with food on the table on a day-by-day basis. And that in itself puts a lot of pressure, because your mind so often can get so consumed by the day-to-day challenge that you are facing that it becomes very difficult to try and apply your mind back to the bigger picture again in terms of, what are we doing with this business? Is this business really gone forever? Is there something that's still there? How do we refine energy to put back into that? And how do we revisit relationships that we had constructed in the putting together of this business and literally start again from scratch, knowing that the dream is probably going to be 10 times more difficult to even achieve now than it was 3 years ago, when the global market and the financial market were very different and the risk was a lot lower and people were looking to invest in South Africa, and saw South Africa as a destination that wasn't as risky at the time. So that's part of the story that I just wanted to share with you in terms of some of the disappointments that have come in and some of the uncertainties. But I think what I would like to do is perhaps share with you just some of the things that I have learned through this process, and some of the things that I'm still learning. And by the way, I haven't mastered this at all. We are still going through an extremely rough time right now. And in amongst that, we still have to get up every morning and say to ourselves, there is a vision. And therefore, have we lost the vision, or do we still hold on to the vision? And therefore, for me, vision becomes a critical component. And vision can be anything from a vision that we carry individually, but perhaps even a vision that we carry as a family. And I think it's so important for each one of us to be very clear what our vision is. What is the vision that we carry within our family? And obviously that goes even into the business side of things. What's the vision that's there? Because without vision, we will never be able to make it. Vision is what gives hope. Vision is something that we hold on to that says, despite everything that's going on, despite these dark clouds, despite the fact that this business has seemingly failed, I know that I have a vision that I'm holding on to. And for me, based on my faith, I could clearly hold on, and I still clearly hold on, because I know that I have a vision that God has given me. And part of that vision is a vision that says there is a bigger plan for South Africa. There's a bigger plan for Africa. And I believe God will bring that plan to pass. And I know that I have a component or a part to play in that vision. And that's why even this business that I mentioned that we have been trying to set up, it's part of that vision. It's part of a business that will be funding entrepreneurs who are carrying very specific godly visions around how we can shift the economies of African nations, whether it's through agriculture, whether it's through renewable energy, whether it's through water, whether it's through various technologies that people are coming up with. I believe those things are going to happen. And therefore, for me, it was a question of saying, despite the seemingly failure of 2019, 2020, does this mean the bigger vision has been killed, or the bigger vision doesn't exist anymore? Or do I need to pick myself up and say, this vision is still valid? I just now need to wake up every morning and begin to think through how we continue on this pathway in a new way. And perhaps, is it a blessing in disguise that the funding that we were expecting in 2020 didn't come through at the time? Because perhaps if it had come through at the time and we had invested in the businesses that we thought we should have invested in, and COVID would have messed things up, is it possible that we would have gone into the market too early? We would have made investments, we would have bought into businesses, and things would have gone south because of COVID. And therefore, as a startup business, we might have been under so much more pressure than if perhaps our funding comes in now, where we are now funding in an environment where we are now factoring in all the uncertainty that's already in place. So for me, I look at that and I say, perhaps that was the blessing in disguise, but it still doesn't take away the personal pressures, the family pressures, the disappointment, the pressure of not having the finances that we need as a family, the children still being under the pressure that they're under, and not having the things that they would want to have, and not being at the places where they would want to have been at. But again, we look at it and we say, perhaps it was a blessing in disguise. Even with our eldest son not being in the UK at this moment in time, we've also looked at it and said, perhaps maybe it was just time that we needed to be together as a family, that with all the restrictions with travel, etc., perhaps if he had gone to the UK 18 months ago, it probably meant that we would not be able to have seen him for 18 months to 2 years because of everything that's taken place. And perhaps God just wanted us as a family to be together, and for us to be closer to each other, to be able to see each other when we need to see each other. And maybe that's what was going on. So again, in all of these things, part of this journey is also looking back and saying, Is there a hand of God in this that is perhaps protecting us? Is there a hand of God in this that is perhaps doing things, shaping things in ways that we do not necessarily understand at the time, but that's actually for our good? And so again, whenever we are in these times of disappointment, it's so important not to allow the disappointment to completely engulf you so that you fail to see vision and hope beyond the disappointment. It's also very important to be asking ourselves the question at an individual level: what is my response to the disappointment? I can either not wake up every morning, or I can wake up every morning asking myself the question, I need to take one step further towards the vision, despite the fact that perhaps everything seems to have fallen apart. So, are we willing to actually wake up in the morning, recalibrate our thinking towards a vision? And I think for me personally, again, as a husband and as a father with two boys, having two boys in itself causes me to wake up every morning, because I'm saying to myself, I need to be up for my two boys. I need to be a carrier of hope to my two boys and to my wife, to my family. I need to also be vulnerable to them and tell them and be honest with them and be open with them the challenges that we are facing. But I will not shrink back and hide away and pretend that everything is okay. And I think often the clouds can become very dark if we try to carry things inside of us. And I think especially as men, we tend to be very macho. We tend to think, hang on, if I share my challenges, if I share my business isn't going well, maybe things aren't going so well at work, maybe I don't have enough money, maybe I don't have enough this. We tend to think that that is a sign of weakness. But when we keep those types of things inside and we don't share them, the clouds get a lot darker, because we are now trying to deal with things that we shouldn't be dealing with alone. Whereas by being open and vulnerable with the people who are close with us, especially family, it brings everyone on board into the same space. And so we can begin to figure out how to move forward together. Likewise, I believe even in work environments, we mustn't keep the dark clouds to build up in ourselves. We must be able to be open and to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be able to share what we are going through, because that's actually what helps to dissipate the dark clouds. Another thing that's also very important is to realize that as much as I am going through a dark cloud, perhaps every other person I'm interacting with is potentially going through their own dark cloud. It might be different to my one. We have been very fortunate as a family that we haven't really had any close member pass away from COVID. But I know many of my friends, many people I know who've had family members, wives, husbands, children, grandparents pass away from COVID. And that perhaps has been the dark cloud that they are going through. So we all have different levels of disappointment that we are going through in some way. And therefore, as individuals, it's important for us to realize that the level of disappointment in the world right now is potentially at the highest that it's ever been. I think every single person we interact with today, they are going through some level of disappointment. They are going through some dark cloud of disappointment, and therefore we have to be sensitive. And the more that we can be champions of vulnerability and honesty and openness and in opening up, it will also catalyze other people to also open up and be vulnerable. And we can actually end up being messengers of hope, where we are also being and listening ear to hear what others are going through. Because what we deeply desire in the heart, as we talk about matters of the heart deeply desires the compassion of other people. The heart deeply desires empathy from other people, because that is what also helps the heart to heal. When there is empathy, when there are other people that can speak positively into us, when there are other people who are willing to listen to the dark cloud that we are going through, that helps bring healing to the heart. And so we can be messengers of healing to others around us as we are prepared to listen to what they're going through, to empathize with them, and to also give them support, and to share what we are going through so that they can also have a foundation to open up. We have to open up as people. We can't carry sadness and disappointment internally for too long, because when it keeps inside for too long, that's where depression comes from. That's where some of the other more fatal health challenges come out of that. It comes out of a heart being so disappointed that it lives in sadness for too long, and it ends up in a place of depression and brokenness, and that leads into health issues. It even leads into suicide and death. And so we need to be very sensitive of these things, of what is happening inside of us, what is happening inside of others. Before I start to finish off and maybe start to see if there's certain questions or comments or anything else that are coming through that I can maybe talk about, I also want to talk about how I have personally wrestled even with disappointment with God. Because, you know, at times these things happen around you and you think, but God, why me? Why us? Why does this have to be so difficult for us? Perhaps it's a family that's dealing with a death in the family. Why us? And there are times where even that disappointment and that anger that comes out of disappointment can also be towards God. And I have to be very honest that there are times I've woken up and I've said, but God, I don't get this, and I don't see your love through this. I don't understand how you can possibly be a God of love when all these things are taking place. And there are times I battle even to, to pray, or to even go back to reading my Bible, where I do get a lot of my strength from. But I believe even being in that space of honesty with God is very important, because it allows us, at least it allows me, to be honest and say, God, I'm hurtful here. I don't understand what's going on here. I'm hurting. I'm disappointed. I thought that this was what the plan was. I just don't get this. And where are you? Where are you? And there are many days I've had those conversations. But I've found those conversations to be absolutely healing to the heart. It might take several days, it might take a week or even 2 weeks to get to a point where I start to see beyond the fog of the dark clouds, and I start to get a sense in my spirit of peace again. But I found that coming clean and being honest with God through my faith has been a lifesaver for me. My faith in God's word has been a lifesaver for me, just being able to understand that there are times of difficulty, but there are always times where that difficulty will come to an end and there will be light at the end of the tunnel. And again, there's some amazing biblical stories that have given me so much encouragement. Whether it's David coming back from a battle and finding that his family has been taken away, and all the people in the village have been taken away when David was away in battle, and he gets to back to the village and he finds the village has been completely ransacked and the people have been taken away, all their wealth has been looted, and he cries out to God and he says, God, how is this possible? We were out there fighting a battle that you sent us to fight, and we've come back home and our children, our wives are gone. Everything is gone, and he's completely distraught and he's crying, but he's being honest to God, and even the people around him are even wanting to come against him. So he's in this place of deep distress, deep disappointment, this dark cloud is over him. But he goes through this process, and eventually he finds strength in the Lord, and the Lord eventually says to him, no, go and pursue this enemy that is stolen from you, and I will surely give you victory over this enemy. And so David and his army, they pursue the enemy, and they fight this enemy, and they take back everything that had been stolen away from them. They take back their families, they take back the plunder, and it says that they plundered that enemy. So they walked away with so much more than what had been taken away from them. So you look at that story and you say to yourself, wow, how does that apply to me? And is that a story that says we might have lost so much, but don't give up? Keep pursuing the vision that you are carrying. Wake up every morning and pursue, because what we have lost might be a blessing in disguise for something that's even greater, that's down the road, that we would never have achieved if this dark cloud would never have come upon us. You see, in God's eyes, there is always a bigger reason why there's a dark cloud that comes over us. And often as people, we're not patient enough to discover what is really going on. And so I want to end off by just encouraging you with wherever you are. I encourage you by saying, be vulnerable, be honest, be open. For those who are married, it is so critical for you to walk the journey with your spouse. To the men who are listening to this, men, share your dark clouds with your wives. It's not a sign of weakness. Share your dark clouds, share your disappointments, share the challenges that you are going through, share them with your wives, and wives likewise. Share them even with your children, because vulnerability, honesty, and openness will open up so much relief for your heart, and that you will not need to carry a burden alone, that you can actually be carrying together with your spouse and with your family. Likewise, friends, whether it's with your friends in your social environment, whether it's with friends and colleagues in the work environment, likewise, openness, vulnerability, honesty is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strong leadership. It's actually a sign of strength. Share those things within your teams, within your colleagues. Don't carry your disappointments alone. Don't try to go through your dark cloud alone. What I know, I think there's this saying that says there's always a silver lining. I believe there's always glory that sits beyond the dark cloud. And so for those who believe in God, for those who believe in Jesus Christ, I truly believe that that is a source of absolute strength. It's a source of hope. It's a source that even though you might be disappointed with the source at times, it's a source that will always bring us to a point where we can see beyond the dark cloud, and we can receive the hope that will build our faith to be able to push forward to achieve the vision that I believe is still out there for each one of us to achieve. So I hope this gives you a level of encouragement. I hope there's some tools, maybe some insights that I've shared that you can take and use practically in your own situations. And I really trust that in time we will hear of some great testimonies of how you have pushed forward through the dark clouds, and how you will speak of the testimony of what you discovered beyond the dark cloud. So I thank you for this time. And yeah, Krista, I don't know if there are any questions or any comments that I can maybe pick up on.
Sure. Patrick, thank you for sharing so openly. And it's such a blessing to listen to somebody sharing in vulnerability and saying, this has been my story. And I can recall of days that I phoned you and you said, today it's one of those days that I don't want to talk. And you are real, you are honest with where you are. But what I'm seeing is a man that are firmly holding on to a vision and a dream. I hear how you, yes, I recognize that it's not easy to wake up every day. And there are days that we doubt, but you always go back to the promises of God, and you know that your faith will carry you through. So it's so wonderful to hear a story of somebody that are saying, this is a living testimony. Life is hard and it's affecting me, it's affecting my family. But as I'm vulnerable and I'm sharing this, my whole family can go with me through all of this. We are not meant to carry burdens alone. And I salute you, my friend, for the strength in your character, for choosing to stand up every day and hold on to a vision that you know is not coming from yourself. You know this is a vision that God has given to you. And I'm also hearing how you are saying, at the right time, things will come into fulfillment. And I do believe that is what we can do, is we can wake up every morning and do what we can do. Hold on fast to that vision that has been given to you. And there might be a suddenly where things will fall into place. And it might look much different than what we thought. But what we will see is that God did cut through, maybe not in the way that we thought, but in different ways. So thank you so much for that. I know there are many people on this line that are from our Unigrow business, and Unigrow is going through that disappointment and dark clouds at the moment. And may all of you be encouraged with what Patrick has shared here today. We've got a vision. We know we've got a good business model. We know we've got systems, we've got processes, we've got competent people. What do we do when the dark clouds of disappointment and uncertainty is just, it's there, it's real. We wake up every day, we choose to live by faith, and we do what we can do for today. And we have the trust that tomorrow things will sort itself out. So again, Patrick, thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for giving us practical ways on how to do this, how to push through the dark clouds of uncertainty and disappointment. And for every one of you that are on the line, I just want to ask you today, please do not do life alone. If you are at a place where you feel I'm weighed down, I don't know who to talk to. You can always please call me and say, Krista, I need to have a chat with you. And I'm more than prepared to set some time aside and have a discussion with you. I know Patrick is also available. Through me, we can make appointments with him as well, but there's always help. Please do not try to do life on your own. So as a community of friends of AFCRI employees that are on here, Patrick, thank you for always sowing seeds into our lives, and may the harvest of your life show an abundant result very soon. We trust with you that we will see that come into fulfillment. So from my side, I don't know if there's a last word from your side, Patrick, but there's some thank yous coming onto the chat. I think this is a more a safer space, that it's a webinar and we don't expose anybody on here, but those who are on here are people who are saying, I want to listen. And those of you that ask, yes, this video will be made available. Please share it with people, so that we can really get the hope back into our community as well. So any last words from you before we end this, Patrick?
Yeah, I think, Krista, thank you so much again for the opportunity. I think that the last comment that I maybe just want to make is I just want to encourage all of us. Let's choose life. Let's choose life. We are in such a time period in our lives where there's just such an overwhelming sense of death and destruction around us. Let's choose life. Let's wake up every morning and choose life, and let's be those who also encourage others to choose life, and we can be the vehicles and the channels that can sow life into other people, because people are so desperate for encouragement. People are so desperate for a word of hope. People are so desperate for an affirmation, for I think, because we haven't we've had hugs and physical contact largely taken away from us for such a long time. People's hearts are so desperate for some love, and I think we just have to be vessels of love. So choose life, choose love. Let's be vessels that can pour out love and life into other people.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. It reminds me about 7 years ago, I was retrenched at the company that I worked for. And in that time of huge uncertainty, I just sensed in my heart, God said to me, will you stop focusing on yourself long enough to go and lend a helping hand? And sometimes that is what we need to do, is to stop focusing on ourselves so that we can lend a helping hand. There are many people around us that you can be an encourager for today. And so again, for all of you that has taken your lunch and just be with us, go and be light and go and be encouragers in the environment that you has been placed. Thank you, Patrick. May you and Maud and the 2 boys be blessed, and may for the hard times that there will be great reward as well. We trust with you that we will see it and we'll hear the testimonies. So God bless all of you. Keep well, and please do not do life alone. Keep in touch, and if there's anything I can do for you, please send me an email and I will definitely get back to you. Have a wonderful afternoon. Sure.